Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, whether you're on the world, it is your Lore Saviour, and, as promised, we are going to be doing some recap sessions of my private Chicago by Night Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition game, because, as I mentioned in a previous rant, for lack of a better phrase, which you can find in the description below, I'm kind of fed up of doing actual plays at the moment, outside of the solo stuff I'm wanting to do more of, which you will be seeing rather shortly, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And I'm really excited to be doing this with some friends of mine, and I also know that these recap things are fairly popular, so I thought I'd be doing one of those. That, and I just really want to talk about this game, and I have like very little people in my life to talk about this game with, and that's where you lot come in. So if you like that, great. If not, piss off. No hard feelings or anything. So, what have we done so far, and what's the setup? Well, the setup is that, as I said, Chicago by Night, 5th edition, and we've done our session 0, we've done all the lines and veils and whatnot, we have them all listed down, it's in a Discord server that we've done, it's like a constant reminder, so it's always there. We're starting off with the Sacrifice, which is the playable version of how the Lasombra entered the Camarilla and Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition lore, and then from there onwards I'm going to be starting, well, experimenting and doing my usual coming up with shit, basically. So, if anything, the Sacrifice is just a very long prologue. So yeah, and I'll mention why we're starting off with the Sacrifice in a moment. So I thought I'd introduce the players. I'm not going to mention them by name, I'm literally just going to mention them by clan. But regarding the friends ourselves, they're all German, I'm in the UK, so organising time zones and things has been really easy because they're an hour ahead of me, because, you know, I'm British, innit? We're all varying levels of queer, we're all autistic, and all different levels of Vampire the Masquerade as well. One player's been playing it for years and years and years. My partner, who's one of the people who are playing, found it with V5, but because of me, have been introduced to other versions of it. And then one other player played some V5 before, but this is like their second main attempt at it, and I will focus on them a bit more as I do this. Only because of, well, you'll see, and I'll highlight certain bits as we get there. So I'm not going to mention names, I'm just going to refer to them by their clan, then player. So starting with the player who is most new to 5th edition and playing Vampire in general, we have the Lasombra player, and this is why we're starting off with the Sacrifice, because they really wanted to play either a Lasombra or Tremere, but they really like the Lasombra, so but they weren't too sure about like the lore and the setting and whatnot and how they were going to incorporate into that, and I just suggested, well, if we start with the Sacrifice, you can learn as you play and just learn about the general setup and things, and also my interpretation things of it. Because if you've watched my actual plays and me ranting about games that I've done in the past, I tend to have a very ad-lib on the fly. I don't really do a whole lot of planning. And a general advice for storytellers and games masters in general, try not to plan more than one session ahead, because you will be disappointed and frustrated one way or the other. And I'll touch more about my personal experiences on that in a moment. So yeah, the Lasombra player is being Lasombra, and we're starting with the Sacrifice, which means I've had to make some alterations to make the Sacrifice flow a little bit. It's a bit haphazard, for lack of a better phrase. But that's totally fine. They seem to be enjoying it at the moment, and again, I will touch more about that in a moment. But first, their character concept. They are the sort of player that has presented me a whole novella on their character's backstory, which is fantastic. It really makes me feel great that they're so keen and excited about it. But at the same time, I'm not going to remember all of that, so I'm going to check things every so often, which, you know, as a player who's invested with their own character, I feel that's not going to be too much of a problem. But their character have got a bit of a complicated relationship with their sire, you know the sort I mean. They had a partner in a true Lasombra fashion, just like completely knocked them down, stripping them away of their humanity, made them do something horrendous the last minute, and they're sort of like a fitness sort of character. They're into their boxing and physical stuff, they've got quite a bit of money, which already they're beginning to flash around, which is good and bad, which I'm sure any games master will think a million different ways how they can screw with their players in that sense. Then we have the Brujah player, who's a journalist of sorts, like wanting to speak out for the truth and letting people know the truth, which kind of means a little bit of a masquerade breach, going on there, which of course is going to play into the game as it goes on, and which is what they want. Like the three of them collectively, they want to feel those struggles and consensually bullied, I think was the wording that one of the players used, which is great because, it's the world of darkness. They are supposed to, as vampires, young vampires, they're supposed to feel this pressure, and like no matter how hard they push, it's always something bigger and stronger that's pushing them back down. Again, we've gone through the whole consenting gaming thing. We've had our session 0, and we find out what is and isn't okay. So it's because of consent in these conversations that I can push the feelings and whatnot of the players, so I don't cause any trauma, because horror without consent is trauma, and we do not want any of that. So this journalist character is also, they had a bit of a feeding problem in their mortal life, which had to have a big old conversation with one of the other players about that, which is absolutely fine, but we've managed to find a way that works. This journalist, Brujah, doesn't also have a lot of money, and if you've been following the thread I've done on Twitter, which I'm also going to link in the description below, you'll notice that they don't have the best haven about, and I'll leave it at that. And then finally we have the Malkavian player, who, if you abstract the bits of their story that they provided, is quite the wild whiplash, sort of a performing circus sort of character. They're obsessed with stars and constellation, and they're kind of a hitman now as their kindred years, sort of, but not really. They've left it up kind of vague for me to do whatever I please with, which is great, because I do have quite a lot of ideas for that, which I will touch upon in future uploads, I'm sure. But also, they also made a point that their sire was part of a cult, and again, they allowed it for me to interpret which that would be, and it's one of the 5th edition ones from Forbidden Religions, which looks like that, and it's literally the first one of the chapter, the Children of Salvation, which is a Golconda-seeking cult that also focuses a lot on diablerie, which the player is kind of aware of that, but obviously hasn't looked into it too much because they don't want any spoilers, which is fantastic. And their sire, I've presented at the moment, is a bit, well, again, similar to the Lasombra player, the Malkavian has a bit of a complicated relationship with their sire. They're very possessive and very lovey-dovey, very cleany, like that close away from being a serial killer, if they're not already. The Brujah player, by the way, doesn't really know their sire, which has also played into their backstory that they're not supposed to be part of the Camarilla, but they're allowed to stay because of reasons, and I kind of have a vague understanding of that reasoning, which I will probably explore in future uploading session things. So that's the basic setup, really, and so I guess I get to talk a bit more about what actually happened. Well, as per the Sacrifices opening, the players meet in an Otolli's diner, which, for those of you who know, is a Easter egg of sorts. Otolli's is a fast food chain owned by Pentex. It's also a reminder that Matthew Dawkins worked on this book, who likes to throw in Easter eggs at everything that he writes, particularly something that's Pentex related. And I'm not saying that as an obsessive fan. That's something that he's like noted in many places on his channel and interviews and whatnot. But anyway, so the players start in Otolli's. The Lasombra players, I said, I had to do a lot of reworking to try and get them to fit in. The Lasombra player and their side moved about the city quite a bit just to avoid the hounds and whatnot, who are taking down the Lasombra, any rogue Lasombra that they can find, because they started appearing quite a bit, as mentioned quite a few times in some of the earlier chapters of Chicago by Night 5th edition. And their sire picked up somewhere somehow that a change was coming, that change obviously being the Lasombra jumping ship, and they're wanting their child to put their foot forward to prove themselves, basically, because it's alright for an older vampire to do it, that makes sense, but look at this young, hip vampire child doing it. They really want to do this. They can be trusted and they're responsible, going out of their own way, their own initiative to do investigative work and whatnot. Now, I obviously haven't told the player any of this, nor have I mentioned the sources, so there's already a bit of intrigue and mystery there. And of course, with this setup, the sire has told the child to watch out for the sheriff and the hounds. Of course, the scene opens with a meeting with the sheriff, which immediately gave the player a heart attack. A consensual heart attack, mind you, if such a thing is possible. But it already created a lot of drama, and that drama would continue onwards. as the main two players that show up and discussing like the letters and whatnot that's found inside. I will mention now that if you haven't played the Sacrifice, or if you are playing it, or you're thinking about running it for your players, or rather, not if you're running it because you already know because you've read it, but if you're a player who's experiencing this themselves, I wouldn't recommend watching this, but maybe you want to, but just keep in mind it may ruin things a little bit if it's your first time. But moving onwards, the various letters and doodads inside, they've pondered over them, and the Lasombra player was like being a bit sleuthy, like trying to work out, failing terribly at some stealth rolls with Cloak of Shadows. Not the Cloak of Shadows, I think it's Cloak of Shadows, the Lasombra equivalent of that, where they just like have the shadows like help them improve their stealth. Or rather, they didn't fail so much, it was more the fact that the Malkavian player was a lot more fucking perceptive. And already there's a bit of drama between them because the Lasombra player was very sussy-wussy about all of this. And they received a lot of interrogation and heat from the Malkavian and Brujah. And I have to say, I do love the role-playing that's happening between the three of them already. And it makes a lot of sense that these two Camarilla kindred are like hounding at the Lasombra, who, by the way, neither two of those players actually know who that clan is. They just know it's a bit weird because they didn't do very well in those roles. One of the players knows that there's a clan that does something with the shadows, but they couldn't remember what. So this is a very alien thing to them in a sense, and there's a lot of suspicion around them for them to prove themselves. And the Lasombra player is dealing with that very well. I am checking in on with them, as I was during the game, to make sure that they were still okay with that, because bleed, which is like the bleeding of emotions from in-game to real game, can be difficult, especially with something like that where you've worked hard on this character concept and they're doing this, that and the other. They're failing badly at these roles. It can be a lot to take on all on board as once. So I'd, as a responsible games master, I'm just like making sure that everything's all hunky-dory, and if things do get too much, I'm going to like get the other two to wind their necks in a little bit more. But so far everything's really good, and like the banter between them, as you can cut the tension with a knife. It's very well done. And so the other two players then like sent the Lasombra character away, like to see what we're going to do with you, sort of thing. And then they read the things and what they needed to do. Shit, we need to drive around quite a bit. We don't have much money. That character had a fucking car. So, but we can't like trust them fully, you know, which again, it's like trying to find that compromise. So the Lasombra went back to their sire's club, which was a meeting point, the aptly named Abyss, which is like down south of the city, which isn't notated in the map provided in Chicago 5th edition. I marked it as like a 45-hour drive or something like that. There was a bit of roleplay between the sire and the Lasombra character, which is the bit I touched upon a moment ago, like, how did you find out this lead? And I met these individuals, had a run-in with the sire, and there was, again, cutting the tension with a knife, the sire asserting themselves in a very flirtatious way, mockingly so, because they know the child doesn't like that. The player characters were given their own suite, like private club room thing. You know, every club in Vampire, there's always that one vampire with like private rooms, as it were. You know what I'm trying to say. So they had that for a little bit, had a little bit of chat on the phone. The sire, Malkavian had a chat with their son on the phone. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. They decided that the first thing they were going to do was speak to Crook, because in their minds that was the easiest thing to do. But they weren't too sure how going to do about it. And something that I found with these players is I think they're overthinking things a little bit, which I did mention to them, like, not as directly as that, and I know some of them are going to be watching this anyway, so surprise. But I'm trying to think about, like, do we know anybody that can like disrupt the renovations or like take things down? And I just said, you know, you could just talk to him. You know, go to the location, find him, talk to him, and your vampires, you have like powers in order to do this. And likewise with the airport, they're thinking too literally about like booking flights and like orchestrating like somebody returning and whatnot, so they can actually get in to collect the two individuals. And again, you can just go in, use your vampiric disciplines, because between them they have dominate and presence. So they have the means to work their way around the system if they wanted to be that panicky about it. But it's interesting to see them think about like the thought process and how they're unpacking things. It shouldn't surprise me, a trio of autistics overthinking things, given that I'm autistic myself. But, so yeah, I do understand and I get that, and it's cool that they're thinking about all these fail stops to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Unfortunately, they don't know the things that I do regarding the tale, so unless they do some very specific things... But we'll see. We'll get to those hurdles as we get to them. Yeah, I just love the way they're thinking and they're talking about this all in character and whatnot. And, they're engaged with the story. They're wanting to, like, work things out, which is great. And it makes me feel good, but at the same time... Move along, you're on time pressure, which is actually a very important thing with this opening bit where you're trying to deal with the three kindred. Like, the night's not that long, especially when literally trying to get around to the different places. It takes like a minimum of half an hour, so a minimum of 15 minutes, and then they're talking, which is taking more time. So time-wise, by the end of that first session, we're about like half one, I want to say. I did write it down, it's in a notebook somewhere, but and I did note that the sunrise at this period, so we're doing like today, sunrise is like 4:30 or something like that. So they've only got like 3 hours left, and they've still got quite a bit to do. So the Malkavian player phoned up their sire, which is when I decided to make the sire all very lovey-dovey whatnot, because it'd been very tense. There was a lot of interrogation whatnot, and I wanted something a bit of a levity just to bring the mood up a little bit. But at the same time, the players from the interaction got, okay, this sire's a bit... Not all in, obviously, stereotypical Malkavian. They were a bit clingy, a bit protective, bit too much protective. It's just trying to find that balance. There's a serious role play, and then you just bring that all up at the same time with this character. There was still a lot of tension there because, like, as I already said, they're not all in, even for Malkavian standards. And with a bit of conversation and role play, the Malkavian player heard a rumour from their sire that Crook, which is the vampire they're going after first, supposedly likes setting things on fire, which they all thought was a bit weird because vampires don't like fires. But it was presented as a rumour. But the sire didn't like Crook, didn't want the child messing with them. So, okay, I'll help you with this, but you've got to help me out in return. So there's a boon there already. Then the players would go and locate Crook. They give a knock on the door. He kind of opens up. It's the Lasombra character that does all the negotiating here. Makes it aware that the three of them know that Crook likes setting things on fire. They talk about this plan that they had about, another kindred is like setting up shop and like maybe you want to go and take him out. And of course, again, knowing the things that I do, Crook is not interested in any money about that. He's got different clubs scattered around Chicago, diners, restaurants, bars, set around the place, and the one that they're going to where he's located is under renovation. He's of that age where money isn't worth as much. That doesn't really bother him, and if that was a bother to him, he'd go and fucking do it anyway. And then the Lasombra trying to think, okay, are there any other kindred that I know that would get in the way? I make her do a roll for it, like Anarch specifically. They got one success, and so, you would know that. And you would know the name Anita Wainwright, who's like the de facto Baron, who isn't really, excuse me. She doesn't refer to herself like that. Like, there isn't a single Baron that likes to be referred to as a Baron, unless it's Baron Callahan in New York. But, none of them really take much pride in doing it. They just lead people. But anyway, she knew about Anita Wainwright. And again, knowing the things that I do, Crook would know that Anita doesn't have anything to do with anything. And he just, like, sussed all of that out, and you may be thinking, well, she got us, the player got us a success, so you should have given that to them, like, had him convince him. Like, well, no, first of all, it was one singular success, so it was barely competent in that, and just because the player succeeded in something doesn't necessarily mean you should give them to them, because as the book writes out, presents itself, whatever, you have, like, the different margins of success, what each one means. And even if you got like 5 successes, like if she bullshitted that really well, Crook would still not buy that because he just knows Anita Wainwright well enough to know that that's a load of bull. You also may be thinking, well, why did you call out the bullshit anyway? Surely he should have been a bit intrigued all the same. Well, because it's not really addressing the situation at hand, in that yeah, he can go and set fire to that right now, but that's not going to guarantee that he's not going to interfere with them. Like, he was working out that something was wrong, so there was a bit of role play, and he liked the enthusiasm. He was trying to encourage him to follow this vice, as it were. And he sussed out that it was a rumour regarding the Malkavians, and he made a wild guess which player was the Malkavian. And so he made an agreement with the Lasombra character that, in the end, that he wouldn't do anything with what was happening the following night, which is the Sierra and Malinkov approaching, well, coming into town, so to speak, on the condition that at a time of Crook's convenience, the two of them would go set something on fire. And they shook on it, and now the Lasombra character has a boon. On our relationship map, as I tweeted, Crook has entered the relationship map, which is simultaneously excited and bothered the player, because on the one hand they have a boon, and now they've got to help them out with something, and setting something on fire that may get them into trouble, and all this, blah, 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 blah. They don't know a lot about Crook. But at the same time, the player acknowledges it allows the character to gain some more contact and allies. If they prove themselves, then Crook may be a good ally, and the character would know a little bit about the Nosferatu, how they just tend to know things and able to find out information, which is fantastic. And I'm really glad that the Lasombra player, who was, again, as a reminder, is the not-so-experienced player with Vampire. And it's wonderful that they're thinking about all these things, and like they're already beginning to feel the pressure, as it were, of existing as a younger vampire, which is I'm loving it, and it makes me happy they're loving it as well, and the concept is working with them. The first session actually ended with the three of them like buggering off, driving to the O'Hare airport to work out how to deal with Flyboy Noah, and they haven't actually solidified something yet, but they've all got bits of ideas sorted. And then at the end of the session, I gave everybody 3 experience points. I know that's 2 more than what V5 actually asks for. But I've never really liked how it just hands out 1 singular experience point. I adopt the more V20 way of doing things. And also something that I did when I did Sea Shanties by Night all those years ago, that was cancelled and now removed from my channel for reasons. I gave the players an opportunity to nominate somebody for a bonus experience point. You know, there has to be a reason for it. There has to be a bit of a role play. It could be for a funny moment, like anything, but it had to be for a reason, and it was the Malkavian player that would get the bonus experience point, because there was something, they were talking to the Lasombra character using constellation and stars, and there's a whole motif with their dialogue, like talking to the Lasombras, like, why should we trust you, like, you see, you want to join part of our constellation, all the stars, you're a separate constellation. It was something like that, but it was very, very brutal, but so poetic, and everybody seemed to have loved that, and which is fantastic, and I can't wait to see what more this unfolds. Now, you may be wondering, what happens now, because there's quite a bit left of this video left. Well, this is where I'm actually going to put a big fuck off spoiler banner here that I've made just for the occasion. If you are one of my players watching this, please do not watch this anymore. If you are a viewer who wants to go into the next episode totally blind with no idea what's happening, stop here. This is a big old spoiler warning in what's going to come next. If you've enjoyed what you've heard so far, check out the things in the description below, which you'll find the various books that I've used for these these private games rather, as well as Forbidden Religions and the other things that I mentioned, as well as my own homebrew. And if you purchase the books via the links in the description below, I end up getting some of those money backs because I'm an affiliate. So if you want to support the brand, what I do, and give me more books to give you more lore episodes and dives and whatnot, that'd be greatly appreciated. But until next time, fuck off. Now, if everyone else, we can talk about what I intend to happen next time. Or rather, what I think will happen next time. They're going to go to O'Hare Airport, and there was conversations about like either causing like a system meltdown because they worked at the Lasombra not very good with technology, which I was kind of hoping they wouldn't do, because it's a weird thing that I see with V5 Lasombra characters, like, oh, they're not very good with technology, they mess things up, so they're going to use it as like an instant hacker sort of thing. The airport is kind of huge, and any problems they would have would get sorted out pretty quickly. Also, I do need to check this up, but I do actually believe that airport has its own, like, fucking airport police or something like that, or it's like very tight security anyway, even for mortal standards. So there's that to consider as well. And there's also the fact that I'm not going to be so fucking lenient that they're not going to be able to explore the airport without fucking off, because the book doesn't ask you to do that. It doesn't require you to do that, and I think going into such steps is a bit tedious, but that's just me. And also, if they do plan to go down the route, oh, just like touch the feed and like break the technology, I'm actually going to adopt what Werewolf does. If you don't know, Werewolf, not with technology specifically, with rage dice, like you're not looking to succeed when you're using rage dice, you're looking to fail. And I'm actually going to employ something akin to this, where, okay, sure, if you fail, you will activate, you'll like do the thing that you want to do. But if you succeed, you're actually going to set up the alarms, which is far more inconvenient for them, and it's going to cause many problems down the line. So their actions to their consequences there. And also, they could cause a system shutdown or whatever and complicate things, but that's also going to complicate them, Sierra and Malinkoff arriving tomorrow. And again, unless they speak specifically to the ghoul, whose name I've already forgotten, like Felicity or whatever, Felicity Miller I think the name is, if they don't speak to Noah via her or those two behead, they are going to be in a lot of trouble. Noah's going to like have them swarm with the like in police. They do have a thing of security. They're going to be taken backstage. Noah is not going to do anything until they pay, which is quite a bit of money. I think it's 2 dots of resources, which is exactly the whole of the resources the Lasombra player has. So unless they find a way of speaking Noah, and I'm going to do my best to help them without like forcing him in front of them, because like he's tucked away at the back. Like I may make him do an investigation roll, and a player like just sees a glimpse. I've just realised they can't do that because they don't know what he looks like. Yeah. So anyway, I need to think about how I'm going to help out with that, because they have to speak to Noah, and if they don't speak to Noah, they're going to get that issue. And I didn't mention earlier on that they weren't going to speak with Genghis, because they didn't know exactly where he was as per the little handout thing. Which, by the way, I did my own mock-up versions of these. I could have just copied them from the book, but I just decided I was going to do my own using Canva. I also provided a nice little envelope via Discord, which I made. The book, it says doing it was a brown envelope, but I decided I was going to use those clan palette themes that World of Darkness did a couple of years ago, to do like a dark blue with a gold wax seal. It made it look a bit fancier anyway, and completely unnecessary, but yeah. Anyway, they weren't going to deal with Genghis or Jengus or whatever the pronunciation is. I've always heard him referred to as Genghis, so that's what I'm going to be using. So if they don't deal with Genghis, then, well, obviously when they're driving about, then they're going to get some issues. They've dealt with Crook, so he's not going to do anything. Noah, as I've already discussed, may do something. That's going to be the biggest issue, I feel. I feel they can talk around Genghis. If they don't, I feel it'll end up with the Brujah being the one with the boon. Because the thing that's suggested in there is that, oh, your feeding domain is mine for a month. And that's obviously going to really bother the player character. So that would be fun to do, seeing Genghis turn up at like some fitness place. And also, because not a lot was achieved, and they may get both of these things done, or one of them, and it moves on to the next night, it will then have them dealing with Malinkoff and Sierra, and the interactions between those two. They may have to deal with Genghis, who may stop them, and depending on how quickly this goes, they may actually end up doing all the fun stuff at the Succubus Club, or at least part of that. Or at least to the bit where Sierra takes the mic from the bandstand and said, the Lasombra are joining the Camarilla. But I don't expect them to get that far, because of all the thinking that they're doing. During the road drives, I'm actually going to introduce some of their touchstones. One of the, there's an old investigator that's like chasing after the Malkavian. I'm going to have a police car turn up, as that's something that's suggested in that book. It will make the Malkavian character and the player feel a bit cautious. Hold on, there's an investigate. There's a police car. The investigators found me. Whatever. the Lasombra character, depending on how well they roll, I'm actually going to have their touchstone appear in the airport. Complete who they haven't seen for like years and years. They've aged. The character hasn't. So there's going to be some interesting dynamics depending on what happens. I'm also thinking a few sessions down the line, because there was an interaction that happened between the sire and the Lasombra sire and the player, where the Lasombra player was given like a phone number, the name of the Brujah, and as an off-the-cuff thing, the sire asked to make a note of it. Like, took the bit of paper, looked at the name, the number that was provided, and squinted, and then gave it back to them. Now, the players have really latched onto that, and at the time, in all honesty, I didn't mean for that to mean anything. It was just them just looking at it, making it aware, just, And the Lasombra character didn't follow up on it, and they've been saying to me afterwards, I really wish I followed up on, like, why did she squint? Why did she spend so time looking at it? And it's like, But now I'm actually thinking of ways I can actually include that into the story. And the first thing that comes to mind is that part of the Brujah's character was, well, the player wanted to be a Lasombra, but the other one got there first. I think having two Lasombra in this mix would have been a bit odd. So they then altered their story that it was a Lasombra that was going to embrace the character, but it was like a Brujah did it last minute out of spite, then fucked off. I am wanting the Lasombra player sire and that other Lasombra who was supposed to embrace the Brujah to know each other. In some respect. The meant to be Lasombra sire is Sabat. Obviously the player character's sire isn't. And I'm also debating the idea of having them like blood siblings, so it kind of mirrors a little bit with Sierra and Malenkov. But unlike Malenkov, who's kind of been coerced into joining the Camarilla, this other Lasombra isn't, and it's like really fucking spiteful about this, and they're going to be hanging around during that the actual sacrifice. A lot of the player like backstory stuff is going to come forth at the sacrifice, like when the players speak to the different clans to try and make a difference, which, to be honest, I'm not going to let them, because I kind of like the whole setup very interesting. Like a Malkavian is going to approach the Malkavian character and be like, you shouldn't be here, demon. The demon obviously referring to how the children of salvation operate. The Lasombra is obviously not going to have any fucking input into this. They're going to notice this the Lasombra Sabat glare at the Brujah player, and depending how well they do, they may notice a different character relating to their backstory, which the character doesn't know anything about. A Venture who was supposed to embrace the Lasombra. So, the Venture also has a bit of a spicy relationship with the Lasombra player's sire. So, that's going to be fun as well. But there's a lot happening further down the line. How about something that's a bit more recent? Well, if the players get to the Succubus Club in the next session, as written in Chicago in the Sacrifice, Crook is not supposed to be at the Succubus Club if he was convinced not to do anything with interfering with the player characters. But I'm actually going to have him appear there, because it's going to be the next day. Crook is obviously going to be doing a little bit digging around, like, hold on, how do these players know about me? Who is this sire who's supposed to be setting up club here? Because something else that the player character mentioned, that's how it started, that the player character dropped their sire, that they're expanding their club, whatnot, further upwards or something like that. And Crook was like, who is this sire? Who is this individual? Who's trying to set up store on my turf? So Crook's obviously going to Nosferatu and find out. The sire is not going to be too happy with that, should that get back to them, which it probably will somehow in the most inconvenient of ways. So Crook's going to be there at the Succubus Club, even though he's not supposed to. He's going to have that very, very interesting conversation with the Lasombra player and say, oh, we're going to go and set this big old building on fire. And that big old building is going to belong to Anita Wainwright. Because I thought it was kind of interesting that was the avenue that the Lasombra character went. Given the fact that they assumed that Crook was Anarch, even though he's Camarilla, just through convenience. I think Crook would want to do that just to stir the pit up a little bit, because it puts him in a lot of power over the Lasombra players. Like, oh, well, I didn't set anything on fire. It was that bloody Lasombra. Those Lasombra can't be trusted, sort of thing. So he's going to try and screw her over in some way. But at the same time, if they go along with it, may provide a useful contact or ally. Again, it depends on roleplay and dice rolls and whatnot. And the Lasombra player obviously wouldn't want to set something on fire because vampires don't like fire, especially if you're Lasombra. But they also don't want the position over them. But as I mentioned earlier on, provides a very good contact, potentially, again, with dice rolls and whatnot. So that's going to be really, really spicy. I'm also going to be looking forward to how they're going to deal with the storing of the two Lasombra characters. Because part of the sacrifice is that, you have to put them in a safe place. And as detailed in the sacrifice, if it's not a really secure place, then the whole thing's going to get burnt to the ground because Jason Newbury, really paranoid about the Lasombra, aware what's going on, sends some ghouls, puts together a makeshift coterie of vampires to try his best to intervene. I'm going to guess that the players are going to put those two vampires in the Lasombra's club because the Malkavian lives in an observatory and the Brujah domain haven that I alluded to earlier on is in an open storage thing, kind of like a storage hunter sort of thing, which isn't very well protected. Yeah, it has got some security, which I suppose makes sense, but I don't think Sire or Malkavian is going to like that very much. But it'd also be interesting to see the Lasombra player's sire interact with Sierra and Malkavian. Malkavian also has a very huge reputation in the Sabbat. He's known as the Khan, like this war hero as it was. And I'd be quite intrigued to see what those dynamics are going to be like. But beyond that and what I've waffled on already, that's really it. As I said, I don't plan too much into the future because if I start doing that, I'm going to get more frustrated and disappointed. And I say more frustrated because I was a little frustrated with the pacing of the previous session because of, the overthinking and whatnot. Again, I'd much rather them overthink and engage with the setting than not just give a fuck, So yeah, that's basically it for now, and I hope this has been somewhat interesting. I don't have a lot going on with these because usually I put music and whatnot and the audio quality is a lot better. I do a lot more processing and producing with this, but it's just as me, a mic, webcam, in a messy bedroom. Just something a little different, just to spice things up a little bit. And if you've enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe, like all that YouTuber crap. Check out the stuff in the link below where you can find the various books that I've used for all my games, but specifically the Chicago-based ones. If you purchase those books via the link below, they're affiliate links, and I get some of the money back. So your input can help stock up the lore bin, as it were. So I'm able to help you out providing lore stuff, because I'm slowly collecting Wealthy Apocalypse stuff at the moment through birthdays and Christmas presents, because they're right close to each other. I'm getting the Werewolf Tribe books, or at least the revised ones, but I'm also slowly saving up for the fairer ones, the Changing Breed revised books. I think they're 2nd edition actually, but regardless, I'm trying to save up for those at the moment. So if you want to help out with that, check out the stuff in the description below. You can also hire me as a games master via startplayinggames.com, which again in the description below. And you can also support me by purchasing my homebrew, the Autistic Storyteller, which allows you to play Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition by yourself. Ghost in the Chassis, which is a one-shot module where you deal with a ghost trapped in a car, hence the title. And also for Games Masters, there's a little fledgling handout thing you can get as well. You can give to your players that gives a very brief summary of everything that goes on and the basic mechanics, and descriptions of the disciplines and whatnot. And also, going back to the Autistic Storyteller, you can also use that for character creation and generation, and it's a very useful storyteller tool, which I will probably end up using for my home games, and I have actually used it for some of my actual play stuff as well. So purchase my things, support the channel, like and subscribe, and if there's anything that you would like me to further extrapolate on in these vlogs, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, leave a comment down below and I'll answer what I can, or things to include for future episodes. So, until next time, farewell.